Welcome to the Orientation podcast series from the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law Common Law section. My name is Professor Kyle Kirkup, and I'm the English Common Law Orientation Coordinator and co-host of this podcast. You will also hear on this podcast channel co-host and French Common Law Orientation Coordinator, Professor Anne Lévesque. We are both very excited to welcome you to the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law Common Law section. Each week, we will release episodes with professors at the Faculty of Law. Our goal is to introduce you to our law school community and to get you excited about the possibilities of your legal education. We will also have conversations on this podcast in both English and French. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube with closed captioning, or wherever you are listening to this episode right now. On today's episode, we speak to Adam Dodek, Dean of the Faculty of Law Common Law section. We chat about his journey into the study of law, his vision for the law school, and leadership in the age of COVID-19. Adam Dodek is the Dean of the Common Law section of the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Law. Dean Dodek graduated from McGill University and Harvard Law School, and then received a Fulbright scholarship to research Israeli constitutional law while clerking for the Supreme Court of Israel. After being called to the Bar of California, Dean Dodek practiced law in San Francisco and then clerked for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in Pasadena. Dean Dodek returned to Canada and clerked for Justice Leclerc Leroux-Dubé at the Supreme Court of Canada. After being called to the Bar of Ontario, he joined the Public Law Working Group at Bordner, Ladner, Gervais LLP's Toronto office, where he practiced until the fall of 2003. At that time, he joined the staff of the Ontario's Attorney General, first as Senior Policy Advisor and then as Director of Policy, and from 2005 to 2006 as Chief of Staff. He joined the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa in 2008 and became Dean in 2018. So welcome to the podcast, Dean Dodek. It's great to have you on today as our last guest for the summer series. I know you are an avid listener and you seemed like the perfect final guest for the season.
Thanks very much, Kyle. It's great to be here. I've really enjoyed the podcast and I'm honored that you invited me to participate in this.
So many of our listeners are very shortly about to be first-year law students. And so I wondered if you could tell us what you remember about your first year of law school.
Well, even though my first year of law school was exactly 25 years ago, and that's a really long time, and for many of our students and our listeners, it'll be before they were born or just after they were born, I remember it so vividly. I just graduated from McGill. I had done well at McGill. I felt excited to be going to Harvard Law School, and suddenly I show up and there's 560 people in my class, and I knew two of them and barely knew two of them. And one of them was a cool kid who didn't have much time for me, and the other one was a classmate from McGill. And I just felt so insecure. I felt, I remember during orientation walking around with my McGill shirt, people were talking about their Phi Beta Kappa, I don't know what that's some American honor society or something, I don't know. People were talking about legacies, their, father, grandfather, whatever, going to Harvard, and I just felt so small and insecure. And the only thing that gave me confidence is this woman came up to me, and I was wearing, my red McGill shirt, and she said, "Oh, you went to McGill?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you'll do fine here. Because you really earned your grades at McGill as opposed to many of your colleagues." And I remember every time I was called on in class during that first year. I remember my small group was 45 students. I remember my large groups of 140 students in a class. And I just remember the huge learning curve. I remember the light bulb going off in some classes and in other classes, not so much. I remember the struggles of first year exams. So I remember that first year really, really vividly. And that's why I've always really enjoyed teaching first-year students. And I've spent most of my time teaching first-year students. And Kyle, you were very helpful in that because you were my very first course tutor, and you helped me to learn how to teach first-year students.
Yeah, first year is just incredibly vivid. And I think a lot of our students will be very happy to hear that even the dean of their law school remembers the first year, as a place that was challenging, but also that you've clearly overcome and done incredible things with your career. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about what you did after law school.
I did a bunch of things that I think sound, I heard your intro and it sounds very impressive in some ways, but to me, whenever I hear that, I feel something different, which is, again, to me, it's a narrative of a young man struggling to figure out what he wanted to do. And I didn't know if I wanted to be, what country I wanted to be in, what sort of law I wanted to practice. Did I want to be in government or private practice? And so that really explains why I had a number of varied jobs over the course of my first 10 years after being called to the bar. And I really spent my first 10 years out of law school trying to figure out what country I wanted to be in, what sort of law I wanted to practice, and ultimately, did I want to be a lawyer who did some teaching or a teacher who did some lawyering? And I landed, after working in government, working in private practice, pursuing graduate work at the University of Toronto, I said, okay, I'm going to really, really give it my all, try this academic gig and try and land an academic job. And I landed, after teaching at Osgoode and U of T for a year each, landed the dream job in 2008, coming to Ottawa to teach at the common law section.
So how did you finally realize that you wanted to make that jump into academia? Was there a penny drop moment, or how did you know?
I think that I was always interested in teaching. I was something equivalent to a dean's fellow at Harvard, teaching first-year students legal research and writing. I really enjoyed that. I've always loved writing. I published a third-year paper in legal ethics. I was publishing while I was in practice. I loved scholarship, and it just increasing realization that I really wanted to give it a shot. And I thought I would be good at it. I thought I would like it. I've absolutely loved every day of it in the 12 years that I've been an academic, and just really, really love teaching, love research. And obviously I like administration enough to throw my hat in the ring for the crazy job of being dean of the largest law school in the country.
Yeah, so let's pick up on that a little bit. So you joined the faculty in 2008, and about a decade later, here you are as the dean. I wonder if you could say a bit more about what made you want to make that leap into more of an administrative leadership role.
For me, it was about wanting to take a leadership role in the community of which I was a part. I had been the vice dean of research at the faculty. I had led or initiated a number of initiatives, including the Professionalism Initiative, which became the Kavanaugh Professionalism Speaker Series. I had been involved with Professor Zweibel in the creation of the Legal Writing Academy, where we were literally blue skying in her backyard, probably now almost 7 or 8, maybe more years ago. So I got to know my colleagues, our students. I thought we had amazing students doing amazing things. I thought we had the most talented faculty complement in the country. And I wanted to lead that group and be out there and tell the story of what we were doing to make the law school stronger than just the sum of its parts.
So can you say a bit more about what a dean does on the day-to-day? I know you do a lot of things, but can you just paint the scene for us? What are you up to on any given day?
Sure. So I'll just sort of distinguish maybe normal times, or air quote, ordinary times, if you can and the times that we're currently living in under COVID, because I don't know what tomorrow or next month is going to bring in terms of the job of a dean during COVID-19. But in ordinary times, you're spending a lot of time on the different constituencies. So I always talk about students, staff, faculty, and alumni. And the dean is also a senior manager at the university. So you spend a lot of time on internal administration. The former dean, one of the things that I did when I got the job is I reached out to each of the former deans of the faculty who are still alive, to Sandra Rogers, Don McRae, Natalie DeRosier, Bruce Feldhusen. I spent a lot of time with and became very good friends with Francois Larocque, who was the acting dean for over a year before me, and got advice from all of them. Dean McRae, who was dean in the early 1990s, gave me 3 pieces of advice. And he said, continue to teach a first year class, which I did for the first year, public law, which I've always loved teaching. He said, get out of your office. And then he said, think about what you want to do when you're done. So let's put that third one aside for now. But I really thought, like, I'm a social guy. I'm not going to have a problem getting out of my office, but I found myself very quickly spending my days from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in my office or at Cabaret in meetings. So a lot of internal meetings on whether it was curriculum, student problems, fundraising, internal administration, the university's strategic plan, etc. So there's that internal aspect to the job. And a big part of the job is external, is you are the representative of the Faculty of Law, Common Law section, to the legal profession, to the public, to the media, to legal employers in Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, etc., and with alumni. So I would spend 2 to 5 days a month on the road, meeting with alumni, meeting with law firms, with different agendas. Obviously with reaching out to alumni, trying to connect them to the school, with law firms and legal employers who aren't necessarily alumni, telling them about the great programs that we're offering and the great students that we have, and encouraging them to hire our students or support our school in other ways.
Sounds like a very intense but very rewarding job. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your vision for the law school.
Sure. So my vision for the law school was and is to create a community for life. So the idea of that is we've got top programs in a number of areas where you can clearly say we've got the best tech law program, best public law program in the country, hands down. There are other areas where you can say we're top 3 in the country, one of the tops in the world. That's great. I want students to come here because they say, oh, well, there's great programs, but and in addition to that, that faculty, they really stick by you. So I want to support our alumni, our students, not just while they're in school, but once they graduate as well. I think it's become a lot tougher in the legal profession, more competitive. The first few years of practice can really be a struggle. And I think if we're able to support our students after they graduate through articling, through the first years of practice, then they will support students and the law school later on in their career. So that's what I've been trying to do, to build alumni support through creating, through meeting with alumni, creating mentorship networks, creating a regional alumni advisor, Erin Cowling, in Toronto, that supports alumni. And ultimately, in 5 or 10 years, whether it's me or somebody else, what I hope people will say about our law school is, wow, that's a great law school. They've got great programs. It's great to be in Ottawa. There are incredible opportunities, and they really stick by their students. They're there for the graduates when they need them.
And I can only imagine then what being a leader was like during COVID-19. I'm sure March 2020 was a challenging month. So I wonder, just shifting gears a little bit, if you can talk about what you think makes a good leader.
Wow. As I take a deep breath, I think that there are different leadership qualities that you might need for different times, and leadership in crisis is different than leadership in different times. And we didn't choose our crisis leadership, whether that's at the law school, or I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Vera Etches, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the City of Ottawa, and to tell her that she's been, I think, an incredible leader and a role model to me. She was chosen before COVID-19, as was Dr. Theresa Tam. They are people who I think just rose to the occasion. And I think during crisis, you need to have a strong team around you and recruit strong people. And I've been incredibly fortunate with that, with our COVID-19 response team that I created on probably March 10th or 11th, which is really the beginning of March 11th is the first COVID-19 confirmed case in Ottawa, and when things really started to go crazy in Ottawa. So I've got an incredibly strong team of vice deans, assistant deans, CAO, Colleen McEachran. And, again, these are people who were in different positions before, some of whom I hired, some of whom I didn't. And to a person, they have each really stepped up and done an absolutely amazing job. I think the second thing is you have to make decisions, and you have to be prepared to make decisions with a lack of the full information. And that is totally inimical to us as lawyers, where what's the evidence? You need all of the evidence. We only convict somebody on beyond a reasonable doubt. We would still be, if we were waiting for all the evidence, we wouldn't have a decision yet as to what the September term is going to do. You have to be able to make decisions quickly, be ready to live by them, and also defend them. And I think the third element is communications is critical. And again, if you look at leaders who I view as role models, look at Dr. Theresa Tam, speaking every day, calmly telling people, Dr. Etches, Ottawa Public Health, the Prime Minister, even the Premier Doug Ford, who I think has done an excellent job for the most part during this crisis. They're up there talking to people every day. And that's what I was trying to do, share my thoughts with the students, with staff and faculty during the course of the crisis.
And for our incoming students who wouldn't know this, you were sending daily, sometimes a couple of emails a day. And I know as myself, as a colleague, but also as a former student, those emails were extremely reassuring. I hope someone has plans to put them in a book for you to save for the archival record.
Yeah, well, all the messages to the students are on our website, on our COVID-19 website, and incoming and returning students can see them if they want and go back. But yeah, that really just developed out of a need to communicate, and it turned out to be a daily thing for quite a while. It wasn't necessarily by design. It's just there was a lot of information, and a lot of information that I was trying to share in real time with our students and with our staff and faculty.
So we were one of the first schools in Canada to announce that we would be going entirely online for the fall semester. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, picking up on this idea of leadership, could you tell us how you and your team arrived at this decision?
Sure. I mean, this was a decision that we were thinking about for a number of weeks. And first of all, looking at public health indicators, looking at what was going on in other parts of Canada, in the United States, in other countries, trying to balance competing considerations. We really, really wanted to have some in-person element. That was something for me was very hard to give up on. We had to think about the demographics and needs and situation of our student body. More than 70% of our students come from outside of Ottawa, and thinking about, does it make sense to require those students to rent an apartment for a semester, for a year, to have one in-person class that may or may not continue the length of the semester? And when we balanced all of those things, we came up with the decision that we were not going to have any in-person activities, and that we would put all of our resources. We made that decision early so that we could then focus on one singular thing, which was preparing to teach and deliver all of our services online and remotely in the fall. We made that decision in May, giving us 4 months to prepare. And I think part of the challenge that you see with the school boards is they were asked to prepare multiple scenarios at once, to prepare for all distance, all in-person, hybrid, and that's really, really hard to do. And so by enabling us to focus, we were able to pivot. We created a committee headed by Professor Zweibel and Professor Forsees, and we hired 18 tech fellows, our students who know far more about technology and than we do, and to support full and part-time professors in developing their courses starting back in May and certainly into June.
Kind of reminds me of the first rule of improv, which is to say yes to the scene. So rather than, saying, why am I in this scene? Why is this happening? I guess there's some space for that, but it's also, how do I make the best of the scene? And I think making a decision quickly and then investing resources so that we have 4 months to create high quality online courses is really a testament to your leadership. So I wonder then, shifting gears a little bit, how do you think legal education might change, evolve in the aftermath of COVID-19?
That's a great question, and it's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit over the last couple of months, and I actually wrote something for SLAW, Canada's online legal magazine or online forum, which we published in the next couple of weeks, and basically saying, welcome to the revolution. And COVID-19 has forced revolutionary change on all of the law schools in Canada. And I'm explaining why before that we were sort of resistant to change. We will see more change this fall than there has been in the last 40 years or more. And that's true for the legal system as well. And that's true for many other areas. The big question that I ask is, how much of this will stick? Because if we just go back in fall 2021 or whenever we're back to in person, if we just go back to the way we were doing things before, we will have lost a huge opportunity. I think what we're seeing now is better ways to do things that we were doing before, and how we can leverage technology, how we can leverage the online environment and really focus and make the in-person experience richer than it was before. So I think that the people that have invested tremendous amount of time, and there are certainly professors that have spent north of 100 hours preparing their courses, recording lectures, thinking about how to engage students online, that a lot of that, now that they've invested that time that they didn't necessarily have an incentive to do before, a lot of that will stick. And so even when we're through the crisis created by COVID-19 and we're able to operate the way we were before, I think it will be very, very different, certainly at our law school.
Okay, so last couple of questions, keeping in with the tradition and the spirit of the podcast. Picking up on that idea of your first year law student self, I wonder if you were to go back and give that person some advice, what would you tell him?
You're hearing me take a deep breath. What would I tell 25-year-old Adam Dodek walking around in his McGill sweatshirt and in McGill t-shirt sitting in a class of 140 where people are talking about Latin terms that I don't know anything about? I think I would tell him, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. What enabled you to succeed to get here will enable you to succeed throughout law school. That would be the first thing. And I think that applies to all of our students. And the second is law school goes by really quickly. It doesn't seem that way when you're 20, 25, 26, 27, and it's 3 years of your life. But when you look back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's an incredible opportunity to take courses that you'll probably never get a chance to take again. Most of our students will not go back for any formal education. I still look back and say, wow, I wish I had the guts to take jurisprudence, but I was too scared and I didn't feel I was strong enough steeped in philosophy to take a course in jurisprudence. I really regret that. On the other hand, I took a course in law and literature, spiritual hygiene for lawyers, where we read a book every week, and that was amazing. And that introduced me to many great works of literature that I probably wouldn't have otherwise read. So take advantage of that opportunity, because for 95, 98% of our students, it will be the last opportunity they have in formal education. So take advantage of the courses, take advantage of the extracurricular opportunities, the speakers, the opportunities that we have in Ottawa, the internships, working on real cases or for real organizations. For me, one of the highlights was working at the Cambridge and Somerville Immigration and Refugee Clinic. Now, I was never an immigration and refugee lawyer, but the experience of sitting and working on somebody's real case and hearing about their experience is something that, again, 25 years later, had a real impact on me and has never left me.
Is there a favorite moment that just stands out to you about your time in law school?
I don't know if there's a favorite moment. There are many. I think that there are many positive things. There are many great speakers. I think seeing the incredible pride on my parents' face. I still look at graduation, and that graduation photo with me and my parents, and just seeing for them, which again, I didn't appreciate at the time, but now as a parent, you can see how you can see that appreciation. I think, there were many great speakers. There were moments in class where you were called upon and you actually knew the answer. So I think there wasn't one particular thing. There were a number of really positive experiences.
Well, great. I know our students are in for an exciting journey this coming fall. And Dean Dodek, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for everything that you're doing, Kyle, and you and Professor Levesque, Professor Liu. You've done an amazing job on these videos and on our digital orientation, which is an example of something that will live on beyond this year.
We'll be looking at it in 20 years being like, that's what law school was like in the age of COVID-19. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to an episode of the Orientation podcast series from the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law Common Law section. You can subscribe to the Orientation podcast series on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube with closed captioning, or wherever you are listening to this episode right now. If you are a first-year University of Ottawa Faculty of Law student, you can also find additional sources at the Orientation 2020 Brightspace page. Thank you for listening, and we can't wait to meet you soon. This episode has been produced by Tech Law Fellow June Gleed.